Why does organization design, OD, take the longest in an M&A integration when it's one of the most impactful things you need to complete a successful integration? What am I missing?
Yes. The easy answer, but not easy to execute, is ego, is organizational complexity, and things that people are not willing to surface upfront, right? So there's a lot of sensitivity.
Welcome to the Vision to Reality podcast. I'm your host, Curtis L. Jenkins, and in each episode, I speak with industry experts, thought leaders, and innovators to break down the strategies, techniques, and methods that turn their ideas into reality. Whether your vision is to scale your business, build and lead a winning team, prepare for your next big career move, this podcast is for you. Let's get started and bring your vision to reality. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Vision to Reality podcast, where we discuss topics with visionaries, people who have turned their personal and professional visions into reality. I'm your host, Curtis Jenkins, and today we have a special episode lined up. We're talking about human ROI, how leadership, talent, and AI are redefining enterprise value, something that can make a huge impact on your business career or leadership approach. And my special guest, Elisa Mahendra, founder of Dynamic Talent Partners. Elisa is a human capital strategist, executive advisor, an organizational transformation leader with more than 20 years of experience in helping companies unlock value through people, leadership, and culture. She has held senior HR and talent leadership roles in global Fortune 500 and private equity environments, and now advises organizations navigating growth, AI adoption, and workforce transformation through her firm Dynamic Talent Partners. Elisa is the creator of the Human ROI Framework. ROI, return on investment? I don't know. We'll find that out, which explores how leadership, culture, and talent systems either compound enterprise value or erode it over time. Her work focuses on helping leaders rethink how organizations design work, develop talent, and lead through periods of rapid, high-stakes change. She's also the host of the Human ROI podcast and the author of the upcoming book, Power to Rise, which explores how individuals reclaim clarity, confidence, and community during disruptive career transitions. Welcome, Elisa. How are
Thank
you?
you. Thank you. I was like, wow, did I do all that? Yeah, it's always interesting to hear the bio because of course it's kind of the rundown of the resume, but it's been a really rewarding kind of career journey up to this point, and I'm excited to be with you today. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. And I appreciate having you. That is an impressive bio. Very impressive bio. The words value started coming to my mind, right? And you talked about enterprise value.
Mhm.
But I know you didn't just wake up one day and say, "Hey, I'm going to be an enterprise value ROI champion." Tell me about your journey and how you got here.
Whew. It was a journey, and I didn't kind of stumble into it immediately, but I think where I landed and reflecting back on it, it's no surprise that I landed here because when I kind of found HR by accident. I call myself accidental HR.
I like that.
I started in college learning about finance and thought, oh, this is a way for me to make money and kind of break the cycle and be, in a better position in my life than maybe how I grew up. And I learned about the time value of money. And I remember Professor Mary Brown. We always remember the first and last name of people who had an impact on us. Uh, and it was my Finance 101 professor. And she talked about the time value of money. And we just didn't talk about those things growing up. So my mind was like, and so I've carried that through kind of my work and thinking about the value of time and investment. And then I found HR through operations at a large financial institution, then project management, and then projects in HR. And spent 22 years in HR in financial services. So you can kind of see that connection stayed with me through all the years. And then when I went independent, I thought, I've done lots of things in my career portfolio, but where do I bring outsized value? Again, that value word kept coming up. And it, it shaped probably over 6 to 9 months until I really centered on what is my point of view on leading talent and what are the components or variables that determine success for individuals in their careers and organizations over time, kind of that durable value. And of course, my 11 years in PE really put me through the forged in fire experience on creating durable value. And so the human ROI was born. And I think it honors my journey. I think it honors the way I think about things. And it sounded good. So I went with it and then I continued to develop it. So that's how it was born into the world.
Okay. You know, that's an excellent story. And what I'm thinking about, there's so many things that I'm thinking about that I'm just trying to narrow it down to where I want to start. So you work for a PE firm.
Hmm.
I work for a PE firm. And we talk about value, we talk about enterprise value, we talk about being force multipliers.
Yes.
And we use these terms almost like it's an investment term
Hmm.
because ultimately, working for a PE firm, you are beholden to investors.
Absolutely.
And just like a company that's public is beholden to investors.
That's right.
And what I struggle with, and maybe you can help me with, is how do I help people understand that when they are presenting themselves, they
Mm.
have to present themselves with that value, right? The things that they've done so that it translates not just to the hiring manager, but all the way through adding value either to Wall Street or to the investors that actually are the reason why you have your job.
Yeah, that is a big question that took me the better part of a decade or two to figure out. So I'll try to be succinct in the way that I describe it because I think it's not one thing, it's a few
Right.
things.
Right.
So let me try to kind of organize my thoughts as I try to articulate it. And if I go off course, please bring me back. I've been known to do that from time to time. So I would say, from an HR perspective, and thinking about as HR people are interviewing candidates to bring them on board. And some people do this better than others today. I would think about what is the value chain, right? To what I do today and how does that impact the role that I'm in, the team that I'm in, the organization and what they're after. I think earlier in my career and even later in my career, I don't know that it's commonplace to think about impact or measurement. Some things are hard to measure. Some things are soft measures. And there's a difference between the outcome you're after, values, shareholder value, right? What they're after, EBITDA, in most organizations. But how do I get from what do I do today and how does this impact, right? So sometimes in organizations, it's hard for people, and I'm just going to pick this because it was part of my past experience. Someone in a call center who's talking to customers every day can get bogged down in the, wow, people are sometimes rude. They're likely calling because there was an issue, and how do I serve them in a way that continues to add value to the organization in the terms of revenue or expenses, right? And so more mature, choosing my words carefully there, more mature HR organizations are able to help the organization leaders, managers cascade goals and cascade, here's our vision, here's the scorecard for revenue, operating costs, culture and values. If it happens to make its way to the corporate scorecard, I hope it does. And that might be a signal to those watching. Do organizations care about those things? And are they on the scorecard? How does that translate to the business unit, to the department goals, to the individual goals? And do people have line of sight in terms of what I have to do and what are my metrics and how that drives the outcome? So it's a process. Not all organizations do it well. Performance management is typically the vehicle that helps organizations align on the value chain and the goal process. So that's, I think, one piece.
Hmm.
What can organizations do to build systems, which is important in the human ROI, systems that are scalable to help people understand where they bring value in organizations? Now, the other side of the equation would be I, as an individual, whether I'm in a role or seeking a role, how do I position what I've done around impact? Because I think that's
Yes.
the bigger question, right? And I
Yes.
think the reason I started with the organization is sometimes you have to see it and know what good looks like before you can start to do it for yourself.
Makes
So I'd say
sense. Yep.
from a systems perspective, that's what it looks like. From an individual perspective, and again, I learned this the hard way, it feels good to kind of take your job description and put it in a resume and say, these are all the things I'm responsible for. So when I've worked with candidates or talent in some of our talent programs internally or career coaching, it's a little direct. But what I ask is, so what? So I call it a so what question. So what that you built a program? What did it do for the organization? So what that you implemented this new process? So what that you led a team of people? So what? Now, it sounds maybe a little alarming when they hear it the first time because of the tone of voice, or I might share it more provocatively, but it's meant to elicit a little bit of a reaction, which is particularly in PE. And I'm not saying this broadly to everyone because some people do care, but they don't care about the things you've done. They care about the results that it brought to the organization,
That's right. That's
right?
right.
So I help people, and I want more people to be thinking about, and what did it change? And think about verbs, right? Did it increase? Did it decrease? Did it optimize? Did it strengthen? Did it align? What are the things that happened? What were the results that you got that matter to the business? And it's all contextual. So what might matter on my resume may be very different than your resume, but it all should ladder up to the same thing. So I think that's true if you have a job and you're writing your performance review. I think it's helpful as you're writing your resume. And just for context, I have all the bullets. We all know how to rate the bullets, and I've increased, decreased percentage points, right? Whatever metrics are on our dashboard, why does it matter? But also, people don't like to read. So make it easy for people. So in my resume, I have a by the numbers section right up top. Because if you read nothing else, I want you to know what I've done. I want you to know the impact I've had on organizations. And so, again, the ROI of an organization investing in me as an employee is I brought this organization these results and I moved the needle on these things. So I'd say from a resume perspective, that's the case. And then there's the intangibles of ROI. So how do I feel as an employee working in the system in this organization? Do I have boundaries? Am I burned out? Do I have good relationships with the people I work with? Is this a culture that's values aligned, right? Those are things that are harder to measure, but it tells me whether or not I'm investing my time and my talents in a place that rewards it and reciprocates it.
Yeah, I like how you gave the original foundational context and then put it from a person, especially coming from the external, hearing it for the first time. It does take somebody aback when you say, "So what?" But
Hmm.
that "so what" matters so much.
Yes.
I'm a hiring manager, so a lot of times I'm trying to drive that by asking
Yeah.
several questions to get you there, and it's not easy at times when people don't understand that. So it makes me think
Great.
about. Go ahead, yeah, tell me.
Because I just wanted to double down on that, Curtis, because if your manager or a hiring manager has to do the work for you, that's a sign that they're going
That
to
is
have
a
to
sign.
continue to do the thinking for you when you come on board.
Yes.
So if you can make it easy, our role as employees is to make our manager's job easier. Period,
Yes.
full stop. So if you can demonstrate that right up front, you're already winning the race.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be honest with you. When I'm interviewing and I'm trying to pull it out of you and I can't pull it out of you, I've already made my decision.
It's like,
The only reason why I try more than once is because of the unique complexities around human communication. It could be
absolutely.
that I asked a question the wrong way or I didn't reach them. So I
Hmm.
give a few opportunities just to make up for that. And, nervousness and everything. But if I can't get anything, I've already made up my decision.
Yeah. And sometimes those are the lessons we need in our life curriculum to learn to say, I didn't get the job. Why didn't I get the job? Well, I won't make that mistake again.
Yeah. Yeah. So this takes me to what you trademarked,
Okay.
right? The human ROI. I want to know more about it, what it is, and how is it connected to the conversations we had already?
Yeah, I think the conversation we had already, I think contextually, right, which is the human ROI, which is the return on investments of our human capital. And as I was thinking about the work that I want to do and the work that I've done over the last 20 years and my kind of background in finance and my background in HR, and knowing that in some organizations, you are a number. And we're hearing so much about layoffs in the world. In fact, last year in 2025, there were over 1 million people laid off, according to the Challenger report. I think it ended up somewhere around 1.2, but I haven't been as connected to the latest numbers. And that is the fifth highest in 36 years of layoffs. Organizations are doing that, and we could have a whole separate conversation around this, around they're laying off in the name of AI. But really, most organizations are laying off because they didn't meet their revenue numbers. So what happens when you don't meet your revenue numbers? It feels personal when people are laid off, but the swiftest lever a company can pull is headcount. It's the most expensive line item. You add the kind of fully loaded costs for benefits and things like that, maybe 20 to 30%. You've got a big number. So when revenue isn't meeting the goal, the swiftest lever is people. Now, there are longer term impacts and implications on that, but the individuals are the ones that bear the weight of those decisions. So I also wanted to think about both sides of that equation. How can employees think about the return on investment they get in their careers? What are they getting? How are they demonstrating the ROI to the organization so they are, as much as they can be, indispensable? How do organizations think about making intentional investments in humans so that they get a return on investment that is measurable, right? So I really was, part of it was my upbringing and shaping my thoughts over time. And part of it was the world we're living in today. Even more so, in the world of AI, how do we continue or rethink or reshape or evolve the way that we think about the human plus AI equation and keep the ROI on the human capital? The genesis behind why the human ROI equation, it resonated for me from just even the name. It's clear what it is, right? Sometimes it's unclear in naming conventions what you're really talking about. And so I think it helps me connect all of my different pieces of work together because that's the ultimate goal. Everything I do in advising organizations and advising individuals is around human ROI. So it was a kind of a umbrella term that helped me connect all my work.
No,
The
I
way
like
that
it.
yeah, thank you. It took a while to kind of get there, right? I went through a couple iterations of things, but this was really kind of that big idea. The second thing was, okay, if this is my point of view, what are the variables that go into it? And what makes the value go up? And what makes the value go down? Right. So I started thinking in the financial terms that, Professor Mary Brown taught me way back in the day. And I started thinking about what creates value and what corrodes value, right? What makes durable value.
Mhm.
And in some of the earlier models, because I am a little bit of a nerd and I grew up through the L&D kind of space, so adult learning theory and how people are motivated to do work. And so I expanded the thinking around part of human ROI is your talent capacity. And I call it capacity on purpose because it's both capabilities and their bandwidth to do the work. Right. So that's the talent piece. That's the individual people. The second variable in the equation is really important. And there's lots of studies over time that call it something different, but leaders as leverage, because that's why so many organizations focus on the leaders. Because I, sitting in HR somewhere, or I, as an executive business leader, can't have the scalable impact on entire workforces than managers do. And we know people leave managers, not companies. the manager is one of the most consequential relationships you have in business. And so if we can really use that leadership layer, those leadership layers in the organization as leverage for anything we're doing, and that is a critical point for growing or eroding value, those leaders. And sometimes they're hidden for a really long time before they're found out. And so if you have talent capacity and if you have leadership as leverage, what makes or breaks results? The ecosystem design. And that's technology, that's culture, right? Those are the rhythms of the business, how decisions get made. And that's a lot of the more OD work that I do. So thinking about, and there's certainly things that fall within that, enabling systems within the organization. But that's how I think about human ROI inside organizations is what is our talent capacity? How do we use leaders as leverage? And then the third piece is how are we designing our ecosystem in our context to be a force multiplier, to multiply that value and make it durable and scalable over time.
Today's episode is sponsored by Thinkific, the platform that empowers leaders, coaches, and experts to turn their knowledge into scalable online courses and digital products. If you ever thought about teaching what you know, building a certification, or creating a program that runs even when you're not in the room, Thinkific gives you the structure to make it happen. It's one of the smartest systems you can build as a leader or an entrepreneur, helping your expertise create value at scale. Thinkific makes it simple, clean, and professional, whether you're serving 5 people or 5,000. To get started, just use the link in the show notes. Again, you'll find the link waiting for you in the show notes. And now, back to the show. I got so much coming at me right now from, because of what I can relate to. And then you had to throw the word force multiplier in it, right? I'll tell you a quick story. So I was at a company retreat and we had a wonderful presentation by this woman who used to be in banking. And she was having this conversation with us. And I looked around the room and I remember saying, I don't think we all get this. And it was apparent that we didn't get it. And it showed up by later in the afternoon. Somebody said to me, that was a waste of our time. I don't know what she was talking about. And I said, well, that means you missed it. It was huge what she was saying. And she was basically talking about what it means to be a force multiplier, to work in an organization that investors invest in you and you have to bring a return on that investment. So that means you do more with less, but that means that the less that you have, they still are force multipliers in their output. Simple if you look at it in financial terms, just like you were saying. And I remember my CEO said the same thing. He said, I don't think they get it. And when we ended the retreat, I understand why we didn't get it. Because we ended with, we got to get it right with our customers. We got to get it right with our employees. We did not say we got to get it right with our investors. And what happened was there was a whole thing around employees and customers. And I said, well, we got to close that out. So I took and wrote down from the CFO's presentation, the enterprise value formula. And from that, having that formula, now managing a project portfolio, you have to be on the positive side of that equation. So if you're in the denominator, you have to be more of that, like cash flow.
That's right.
And if you're on the bottom side, the numerator, you have to be drawing cost out, right? And that's how I run my organization as a project management office to help with how do we create value. And even in the book that I wrote called the only job search book you'll ever need, when I talk about using the 4 P's of marketing, we talk about product, price, promotion, and position. It's still a financial thing, right? And in order to get the biggest price for yourself, you as a product has to show up and you have to show that value, that intrinsic and extrinsic value. I apologize. You're sending off a lot of alarm bells with me, right? So we're connecting here.
Yeah.
But now, can we have a conversation? Because it was another thing you said. All right. Why does organization design, OD, take the longest? and an M&A integration when it's one of the most impactful things you need to complete a successful integration? What am I missing?
Yes. The easy answer, but not easy to execute, is ego, is organizational complexity, and things that people are not willing to surface upfront, right? So there's a lot of sensitivity. I spent the last 11 years with an organization doing lots of M&A. And my team was responsible for a lot of the integration activities and making sure that people were productive, felt part of the team. And I think even earlier, what you shared about why some people in the room got it, but some people didn't, and how we talk a lot about customers, we talk a lot about employees, but the third constituency of shareholders or investors are not talked about. And so I'll say a couple things, and they're really both related. It comes down to change management.
Mm,
And partly that's why I've decided to focus there, because particularly in the PE space, the pace and complexity of change is not something you manage by old standards. It's not something that you start the change process and you end the change process and it's cleanly done and then you move on with life or you move on to the next one. Think about the world we live in. We're constantly being disrupted by different parts of change. And I think that org design and org development and making sure that your organization is effective, right? OE comes down to what's in it for me, right? With them. So, what's in it for me as an employee? What's in it for me as a leader? What's in it for me as an investor or a shareholder? And I think when organizations and executive teams can have that conversation, then you can build the ecosystem design to address the needs and wants of your constituent groups. So, I think coming back to it's an ecosystem problem, which is why I was very intentional about putting that in the equation. Because you can do all the right things, you can say all the right things, you can give people training, you can have trusting relationships, you can have great engagement scores and still not optimize your revenue, still not optimize your return, because there's likely systems level problems that are very complicated and are different by organization and by context. So when you're bringing in, so I'll take that down to the level of, okay, we're taking on an M&A, right? We've acquired an organization. We're trying to figure out what the org structure is going to look like. Oftentimes, the right people are not in the room, or we haven't given enough opportunity for us to discover with the right people and bring that expertise into the room. So there's things that are just missed. And it's the meeting after the meeting, right? A core group of people, because oftentimes people are in NDAs, right? And there's only a few people with limited information who are
right.
taking their best guess at how to design the organization, but they're likely designing around people. Who are the players we have today? And it's a miss. It's a short-term view of a long-term problem.
Mm,
So we are not going to keep iterating on org design because that creates additional disruption in organizations and uncertainty. But we do it because we have limited information. Maybe we didn't get all the information in the data room. Maybe we didn't ask all the right questions up front. We said, what do people do? What is their title? Right? Which may not also translate across organization lines. We may be in different job architectures. So there's a lot of mapping that needs to happen that presumes that they have a job architecture in place. So trying to match jobs, trying to match roles, looking at performance, looking at the ego, looking at are they a founder-led organization? And oftentimes that means, well, we got to find a place for the founder. That might not be the right place, but it might be part of the agreement that we need to find a place for the founder. So I think there's so much complexity in the system that teams really need to ask the right questions on the people side. But it can't stop there. What is, again, the ecosystem design is what are we designing for? What is our go-to-market strategy? What is the operating model that's required to deliver value? And that takes time. And often we are impatient and we want to see the value show up in the financials. So we just want to get the thing done so we can see it on the financials. We'll figure out the rest later. And then we iterate and iterate and iterate. So I think it's if you want to go quick, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. right? That old adage, and I'm sure I butchered the actual quote, but something like that, which is it takes time to slow down and really survey the ecosystem and how we operationalize culture, leadership. We often don't have the patience for that in organizations. So that
Yeah.
that that would be my initial response as I think about what I've seen in my past.
Hey, I just wanted to take a quick break to say thank you for tuning in to the Vision to Reality podcast. If you're enjoying the show, be sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you're ready to level up your business or career, I've got some great resources for you. To turn your business vision into reality, my book, Vision to Reality, Start Working, Start Living, is available now and filled with strategies to help you bring your goals to life. Plus, the companion Vision to Reality digital workbook is the perfect tool to guide you step by step through the process. You can grab both at curtisljenkins.com. And if you're preparing for your next job search, check out my book, The Only Job Search Book You Will Ever Need. This book uses proven marketing strategies that have been used for over 60 years to help you rise above competition to land your dream job. You can grab your copy at curtisljenkins.com. And I have great news. This book will be updated with a new version that includes recent impacts on the job search process, such as remote work, AI, government policy changes, and much more. Thanks again for listening. Now let's get back to the conversation. And I do understand. I would even add, especially with global companies, you have works councils and things that you have to deal with, and there are some
Exactly.
barriers.
Sure.
Sometimes there's a financial piece associated with it, and with legal entities, right?
Mhm.
Where are we gonna operate out of, and how we're gonna move people around,
Yes.
and in some cases, and consolidations, or your footprint.
Mhm.
So there's so many things that go into that. I do get it. But it does make it difficult from an execution perspective when, just like you said, speed of execution is speed to benefit and synergies and things like that. I can talk M&A with you all day long because I live and breathe it.
Yes.
Who is the human ROI for? Is that an individual? Is that a company? Is that a group? Tell me who you serve.
Yeah, I think what it's a good question, and I don't know that I've counted anyone out. So the reason I landed on it, as I mentioned earlier, is because I think there's a place for it in terms of organizations getting an ROI on their human capital and individuals thinking about their place in organizations. So I think the framework, the point of view, the component pieces are something that individuals need to be thinking about for their career. Who I serve in Dynamic Talent Partners is our organizations, because that's where I can have outsized value. That's where I can bring force multipliers. That's where I can have impact at scale. And that was also a decision I had to make because I'm drawn to helping the individual human, but I know that I can have more impact when I do it at scale in organizations. So while the philosophy and the framework can help individuals think differently about how they approach their careers or how they approach their search, or if they're in transition, it really is doing it at scale in organizations because that's where the ecosystem design piece lives.
I'll never remember Johnny Carson and the
Hmm.
routine he
I
used
sure
to
did.
use with Karnak did Magnificent, right? And he would say the answer, he put it up to his head, and then the question would come out. And I hope I don't butcher this, but you might understand how I'm asking this question. So I'm at a networking event and somebody says, I have this problem.
Hmm.
I go, Alyssa, Elisa, what was the question that they asked me or the problem that they presented that you are the solution for?
Yeah, it's an interesting, again, way to think about the question because it's, and when I kind of half rolled my eyes there because, we have PE has its own lexicon. And, one of my old firms, we had a acronym library. So I appreciate even in the beginning, you're like ROI, return on investment, because we take for granted that it's just the language we're using. And so as I went kind of independent, everyone's like, who's your ICP, ideal client profile, right? Who do you serve? What problems do you solve? And it took me about 6 months to really shape. I feel compelled to help the individual who's in career transition, but I know I can have bigger impact if I do it at scale in organizations because I'm redesigning ecosystems to help them stay, be more fulfilled, have a greater ROI, and for organizations then likely to have to lay off more people because we're designing ecosystems that work for more people. So I'd say I centered on 4 dynamic talent partners. And again, it's named intentionally because I do a lot of work in partnership. If I can't solve your problem, I have someone in my network that can. So I never work with organizations say, "Oh, I can do that," if that's really not where I play or
Yeah.
not where my greatest gift is. I have someone in my network. So I love that you asked the question because as I'm out networking with people and they're saying I have this problem, like, I got a guy, I got a gal. So I'm always like the street vendor with the coat, like, what do you need? What do you need? Because I may not be the person to do it, but I have a very rich, robust network that I bring in, and I don't, some people are like, "Oh, I want a referral fee." No, I don't care about that. I want to solve your problem, and whether I can do it or someone else, I want to make sure I'm connecting you with the right people. So I think it's a great way to frame your question. Typically, when people need my services or my support or my brain on something, it's during high stakes change. And that really is where I've centered myself because it's not just an incremental change. It's we have a unique opportunity here to create the greatest value if we make a 5% increase in performance, time to productivity, right? I know I can do that because I have the receipts for it. So high stakes change and we partner, right? I don't support, I don't advise, I don't help, right? It is a partnership. That's kind of the way I work with people because I believe it's a give and take. So high stakes change, which often presents itself as AI implementation and kind of that leadership development piece because they're the leverage piece. So if we're working on ecosystem design, the culture, that's really where the pain starts showing up. So most of the work that I do takes clients from pain to plan in 12 weeks or less, right? Always depending on the work, but really if there's a pain point and if there's high stakes change, because I have a change management background and ProSci certification and things like that. I've done it many, many times. Those are the juicy people problems I want to be solving.
Change management. That's a big word. I've been
Mhm.
dealing with change management for so long in different ways, right? What do you think people get wrong about change management? And then how should they be thinking about it?
Yeah, again, a great question because and one that I've been waking up in the middle of the night thinking about. I have what I call nightstand notes
Hmm.
because my mom says I have monkey brain. I'm like my brain's always conspiring and connecting things. It's just I try to connect things to make sense of them. So I will wake up in the middle of the night and I will have to write something down or I will come up with something. I think maybe even Human ROI came in the middle of the night and I write it down on my nightstand and I leave it there and then I revisit it the next day. So I think what people can do better, right, to be nice, is change management is not all equal. So I think sometimes as practitioners, and I'll say this even in my early years, there can be a playbook to an extent. But if I give 5 different people a playbook, it's all going to be different in terms of the way that they implement. So, I stood up the change management practice with the large global financial services firm, ProSci certified. I have my ProSci map here on my right. And I think it still holds true. But if people are rigidly applying it, it's a miss because organizations, again, PE and others, the pace and complexity of change is not what it used to be. And it's often compounding. So we're planning for one change in an organization, implementing a new system, right? Or we're in a department and they're wanting to implement AI. We need to account for all the other forces of change that are happening in the organization because the human who needs to change behavior is not just changing this one thing. They're changing these 20 things. So I've adapted my approach again to acknowledge that. And I think what more organizations can do is think about the human component beyond communications and training, which is often what change management plans end up being, right? How are we communicating and cascading the change? How are we training people with, knowledge to create a desire to change? And I think that's a good foundation. But it needs to be contextual within the organization, and it needs to be contextual with everything else and all the other disruptions that people are managing today.
Yeah. It's a big deal.
And
And I think about even what I've experienced with change management. First, it's not enough.
yes,
Then it's, oh my God, we need change management. And it swings to the other side of the pendulum and everybody just says change management, but not really understanding what it is. And I think you hit it on the head. It's not a one size fits all for everybody.
right.
You have
That's
to
right.
really dive into it.
Yeah.
Talk to me about power to rise.
Yeah, so this was an early kind of project for me as I went independent. And again, my heart is to help individuals, right?
Yeah.
I grew up in L&D, then talent management, and I really was seeing people around me, and not all, but the million people who were laid off last year, and thought, there are so many people struggling right now in the process of being laid off that were high performers, even senior people who don't have the HR or talent management experience that I have. So what if I could help those people? And not in a way that's like, I should be a career coach now, right? Because my heart is for those people. But I'm always thinking about one to one, I love because I want to connect with the human. But how do I have impact at greater scale? And so thinking about in those moments, all the conversations I was having with people who had been laid off, who still call me now, even a year later, people are out of work for 12, 18 months because AI is sorting resumes, right, based on SEO and other things. So people aren't being even seen by real humans, which is good for some things and not great for others. And people are losing their sense of identity. And so in that book, I have a different set of models that kind of guided my thinking about it. But I started to think about power to rise because people feel powerless in that situation. And really, people are grieving the loss. People are grieving loss, and it's hindering their process to get back to work. And I also recognize that with traditional outplacement, while it served people for many, many years, we're in unprecedented times. So if people jump into, I got to get my resume, I got to get my LinkedIn profile, I have to talk to so many people a day, they're not doing it from a position of strength or confidence. They're certainly not clear thinking about, what if I don't want to do what I did before? What if I was miserable and burned out? Maybe I need to reset my nervous system. Maybe I need to think about things differently. If I could be the creator and architect of my life in the next phase, what would I be? What would I do? So it really was from that place that I started thinking and writing. And as I was talking to family and friends and people who had been let go, it was actually my sister-in-law. She's like, can I just tell you something? I'm like, sure. She's like, can you please write a book? Like, write this down into a book.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. So I started doing that. And the idea is power is a coaching model that I use, and it's POWER. And I've always kind of been drawn to that word, not because it's like, okay, Shira, I have the power. These reference for those 80s kids, Princess of Power, but it was really around regaining your power and your agency. Because when you're in a situation like that, and frankly, even if you're sitting in an organization burned out today and waiting because you can't leave because the market is what it is, how do you reclaim your power and rise into what's next? So that's how I came up with it. And it's pause before you pivot is the P, right? Because there's so much power in the pause, but we don't do it. We
Right.
don't do it when we're in MA. We gotta, move quick and see return. We don't do it in our career search because we've got to get the next job because we need to continue to pay our bills. So pause before you pivot.
Okay.
O is own your story. And your story is no one else's story. So it's really connecting you to your values, what motivates you, what you're up to now, what's your point of view on things. And I think from what I gather, there's a lot of people who don't have a point of view or haven't really out their point of view on things and as
Hmm.
it relates to work or why they do what they do. So we dig into that, and the book will dig into that. You is work your plan, because we do actually need a plan. I think that's maybe the project manager in me. I'm sure you can appreciate that.
Absolutely.
The E is engage your network because 70 to 80% of jobs are filled in the hidden job market today. So what that means is it's not happening because you posted your resume somewhere or you clicked easy apply on LinkedIn.
Right.
It's the people and the connections and your community, which is really the differentiator. So E is engage your community and R is rise into what's next. So that's the framework behind the book. And it's 5 steps to own your career with clarity, confidence, and community, because I think those are the 3 things that really help you get through whatever you're going through, whether you're sitting in an organization unfulfilled or you're in career transition that was forced upon you.
Nice. I like it. When is it coming out?
So I was really aggressively working on it and trying to get it out earlier this year. And then I thought, I really need to slow down because
Need to take that pause.
I need to get the pop. But I was compelled because I'm like, people need this. They need this right now. But I started putting stories from other people who had gone
Okay.
through transition. So it wasn't from my lens, but really community. And it's been amazing. And I've loved it so much. And everyone that I've talked to has come out so much more fulfilled, a different energy in their life. And it was, laid off is what people think, especially in transition, but it's really
Uh-huh.
liberation. And you get to
Okay.
now be the creator and the author of your life. So I'm putting a lot of stories in and there's some other fun tidbits. So I'm targeting September as my,
Okay.
kind of a birthday present to myself and getting it out there into the world. So I'm targeting September and I'm excited to bring that out into the world.
September. Virgo or Libra?
Libra.
Okay. You just missed
Yes.
it.
Always with the balance. Always with the balance.
Well, you started telling this story about helping people, and I'm gonna ask you a question that I typically ask my guests. But before I do that, I want to do a public service announcement to help some people myself.
Great.
So I'm not looking for a job, but I'm always looking for a job.
Hmm.
And I tell people to always put yourself in a position to understand where you are in the market.
Hmm.
And so I will say a couple weeks ago, I was having a rough time at work. Some decisions were made that I had to see through, and it was tough. So I was at my most vulnerable point, I would say. And if you think about when you get laid off, you're vulnerable. So
Absolutely.
so I get this email, and this email was the perfect job. It was if I had to write my next move, exactly what it was, the title, the role, the compensation, all of that came through in that email. And it
Hmm.
came through from a person that was from a credible organization. And so again, what I do is I'll apply, or at least I'll inquire. And what happened was, they asked me for my resume, and I sent my resume. And of course, I hadn't updated my resume in a while. Now, when I say a while, for me, that means I haven't done it in a year. But I know people who haven't done it for years, 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 right? So
Absolutely.
I knew it was pretty current and was okay, right? It told the story that I want to tell, at least 80, 90%. But again, I'm just fishing because I want to see where I am in the market.
Hmm.
And then the person said, "Hey, your resume is this close. I'm going to have someone look at your resume and maybe help you finish it." And so I said, "Okay, I've used a resume writer before. Let me see." But then when they got back to me, that's when the red flag started going up, right? So here's my prices. I can help you. And then I said, let me just check the email of where this came from. So the person was legitimate, but the email, why would they work at this company but send me a Gmail email? So then I looked up the person, and I happen to know people that work at that recruiting firm. And I know people that work at the firm where they said the position was. So I started making some phone calls, and there was this thing around the urgency, right?
Yes.
If I'm ready to work with you, if you don't like this price, tell me the price. And then I said, you know what? If I can get that far, knowing what I know,
That's right.
folks are really. in a vulnerable position and these scammers are out there, and AI is not only taking your job, but
Yeah.
AI is enabling the scammers.
Yes.
So I wanted to share that, right? Because I hadn't shared that with a community that of people that should know. Now I'm going to pivot to my question
Well,
about you.
can I just
Yes.
ask, because I think thank you for sharing that, because it does enable so many scams, and it, like, burns me up inside that people are taking advantage of people who are vulnerable. And it's not
Yeah.
that it hasn't always happened, right? I think it's,
Right.
biblical stories are about this, right? And we learn over time, but it really is unfortunate that in a state of vulnerability and in some case desperation, people are being preyed on. So I think thank you for sharing that. And also thank you for having this platform so that job seekers and people who are unfulfilled or testing the market on how they're positioned in the market have a resource available to them. So just kudos to you. Thank you to you for the work that you're doing.
All right. Thank you. Thank you. It's great guests like you that make it worth it. All right. So helping people. I like to ask my guests this question, especially since you talked about helping individuals. And that is, who's one person that you helped without giving all the details about that person, but something about helping that person actually had a profound effect or a change in your life? Tell me that story.
Ooh, that's a good question. Kind of a curveball because I wasn't prepared for that. I think there's a couple that come to mind, and maybe I'll give too many stories, and
Okay.
there'll be many
Gotcha.
because I want to draw from something way back when,
Okay.
and maybe I wasn't even qualified to give advice at that time, and then something more recent. So I'll give you kind of two of those. In Earlier in my career, I was kind of on the fast track, so I tended to be in a position to mentor younger professionals. And there was a woman who I connected with as a formal mentor as part of a mentoring program. Looking back, it was, I think, good advice for the time, but now looking back, I'm like, did I really say that to her? We were in a very traditional financial services, very conservative, and now I probably would be either canceled or fired for this advice.
Hmm.
But sharing with her that the way she was showing up professionally probably wasn't the right way in this organizational context. And I told her, you need to dress for the job you want, not the one you have.
Yeah. I've heard that before.
And we've all heard it, right? Because we were all told that, right?
Right.
And so, and I think for me, like I had to wear stockings if
Hmm.
I wanted to wear a skirt, right? Don't wear a ponytail if you don't have something around it. Don't just have a ponytail, right? These are things that were told to me that I then shared. Now, at the time, it probably was good advice given the context,
Hmm.
but I was told those things from a corporate etiquette class that was provided, right? And I grew up where I didn't learn those things because no one around me, I'm first generation college, first generation professional. So I didn't know anything. I'm just out here trying to make it work. And so those are the things that told me. So I probably chameleoned for the first couple years of my life and career because I wanted to dress the part and talk the part. And noticed maybe even a little code switching in the beginning, right? Of like,
Yeah.
I'd talk to friends and family in a different way, and then I'd show up really buttoned up and professional. So I'd say it probably served her well at the time because I saw her rise through the ranks. Then I've seen her go on to do amazing things. She's had expat assignments. She's moved abroad. She's been at some of the biggest logos that we all know and all use
Okay.
every day.
Yep.
So, and we're still in touch. And she
Nice.
shared over the years how impactful our relationship was in those early years. So I'd say the outcome, the ROI, was good. But looking back, I may have just been sharing things that worked for me. And now I know that it's not a copy paste, right? It really is listening to the person and showing what they bring authentically to the table. So that's a little
Okay.
bit of lesson learned, but a little bit of kind of in the beginning. Fast forward, I also do pro bono and volunteer career coaching. And one of the organizations that I do that with is called the Labor Club.
Hmm.
And the Labor Club, which I love and shout out to them, along with the PAR WCC, helps women who have been laid off during or after maternity leave.
Okay.
Sorry, pregnant, during maternity leave, or right after maternity leave within a year. And even when I found out that there was a group of women who this happened to, I immediately was like, what? Are you kidding me? Of course I want to help these women. And I think when you're talk about vulnerability, if you're laid off under regular circumstances, your ego, your identity, your sense of belonging, it's all taking a hit. But now you're about to welcome this baby into the world, or you have just done that. Your emotions and your hormones are all over the place. You're so emotional. You don't know what's going to happen next. Or you're afraid to show up pregnant to an interview and what they'll think, right? Or if they'll actually hire you, or if they'll quietly not say anything, but then in the background not hire you.
Hmm.
And so it probably had a more profound impact on me, because again, helping the person, not the professional, through that experience. And so that's also, I think, why I've slowed down, because I think there's so much I learned, through that process of you need to help the person in transition, not just the professional in transition.
Yeah.
And all the things someone needs when they're in that space beyond a resume rewrite and a LinkedIn rewrite. So I'd say those two jump out to me in terms of stories of people that I've mentored or coached over the years.
Yep. Okay, good. I get goosebumps when people tell me these stories. So thanks for sharing.
Yeah, of course. Happy. It was a good question. It was a good question.
Well, speaking of questions, before we wrap up, is there a question that I didn't ask you that you hope that I would?
No, I think it was a great conversation. I think we covered so much in such a little time, and I'm just grateful to have had the opportunity to speak to you today and be connected, and the fact that we connected through another connection,
That's
right?
right.
So I
That's right.
that there is so much power in community, power in connection, and I never would have met you and learned about all the important work you're doing if it wasn't for the person in my network and just saying, "Hey, I think the two of you need to meet."
Yeah,
So
that was awesome. Yeah.
even back to your question about if you're at a networking event,
Yeah.
how should you be thinking? I think for your listeners, don't underestimate that. Don't underestimate that just having real, authentic conversations. You're not selling anything. You're just be genuinely curious about learning about other people. And it's been fascinating. I've met so many amazing people and so many connections to other great people through that. I feel really grateful. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. So tell us how can we connect with you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best because, I'll see it right away and then we can connect there. And then if there's something that we find that we have in common or just set up a coffee chat, I'm always looking to meet incredible professionals and people. So LinkedIn probably is the best way.
All right. We'll put your information into the show notes.
Great.
And I want
Thank
to
you.
thank you for being such a great guest.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. And to everyone listening and or watching, to my visionaries, keep bringing your visions to life. And until next time, take care. That's a wrap on today's episode of the Vision to Reality podcast. A huge thank you to today's guests. You can find all of their contact information in any resources mentioned in the show notes below. Also, can you do me a big favor? If you found today's conversation valuable, I'd love for you to subscribe, leave a comment, and a review, and share it with a friend or colleague who could benefit from the information shared today. And remember, vision without action is just a dream. Let's turn those big ideas into reality. I'll see you in the next episode.